published this morning that I actually recorded yesterday. But man, when I saw this news come down, we got to talk about it. The Big 12 apparently will not do a deal with private equity. And I think that's my personal opinion, it's an absolute huge mistake. I think they're missing a major opportunity. They want to be, Brett Yormark said he wanted to be the first conference to do a private equity or private capital deal. And it looks like, based on what he said to a reporter, which I'll share with you in a minute what he said over at Front Office Sports, it's not happening. And not only are they not doing a deal with private capital or private equity, the league naming rights deal that they've been working on apparently is on pause. Where's the Big 12 going to get money to compete with the SEC and the Big 10 if they're not doing this? I felt like these types of things are their only options in order to at least try and remain competitive, and they've decided not to do that either. And I think it's a major, major mistake. I'll be honest with you. Major mistake. But that is what's happening. Welcome to the live show tonight. Thank you all for joining. Apologize for being late. I had some technical difficulty I was trying to deal with here, and don't want to bore you with the details, but when you're preparing for a show, sometimes you have to schedule it in advance to try to get all the stuff done that you need to get done as far as setting it up, which unfortunately sometimes you're not able to meet that deadline, especially when something like this, when news is breaking. But I do want to thank you all for joining the show tonight. I'm going to go ahead and get into this first article. Mr. Dave Rumsey over at Front Office Sports, two of the articles I'm going to talk about tonight in this show, the one involving the Big 12 and then the one we're going to talk about later, hopefully we'll get to about the potential expansion of the NCAA tournament. Dave Rumsey wrote both of them. So hats off to Dave Rumsey, doing a great job covering college sports over at Front Office Sports. Most of you probably remember Amanda Kristovich. She also covers college sports over there for them. Dave Rumsey's another one. So we're going to go ahead and talk about this first topic here, which I mentioned, which is the Big 12 not doing a private capital deal and not doing a naming rights deal. And again, where are they going to get the money? But let's go ahead and talk about this. It says Brett Yormark, Big 12 puts private equity and naming rights on pause. They did a Q&A with Brett Yormark, and here was the question. Where does the Big 12 stand on selling a stake of the conference to private equity? Here's Yormark's answer. We've explored all that. We did it probably for the better part of the year. We're not ready to go in that direction, but we know what the options are. We know what the options are out there. We've been educated at the highest levels. Mr. Rumsey, thankfully, asked him to expand on that and said, why aren't you ready to take that step? Here's Yormark's answer, and I think this is telling, because when I first saw this, I thought, okay, they're not ready to sell their naming rights, because the title of the article is Big 12 puts private equity and naming rights on pause. It says Big 12 discussed plenty of changes to college sports, but two major revenue-driving ideas the conference once considered appear to be dead. And I thought, okay, they're not going to sell the conference stake of the conference to a private equity firm. I think that's how they labeled it on Twitter. That's how they kind of led you into it. And I thought, okay, they're not going to sell part of the conference off. There's still other ways they can make deals with private capital firms that don't involve them selling a portion of the conference. But I think based on this next answer Yormark gave, they're not going to do that either. Because here's what Yormark said to that follow-up. When they asked him, why are they not ready to take that step? Here was his answer. The board's not ready right now. And there's probably lots of reasons for that. There are so many different things going on right now. But I think I think we're well informed. We know what's going on in that world. We hired a bank to consult and give us direction. Show us what the optionality is out there. And we're just not ready to jump in just yet. Another follow-up question. Great reporting here by Mr. Rumsey. He says, was there good value available if you were ready to take the step? He says there's different ways to look at it. We were exploring a potential partnership that brings strategic expertise to grow the business of the Big 12, while also having someone that could be a capital resource. So the model we were looking for and exploring was someone bespoke, custom tailored to the needs of the conference. And we're just not ready yet. It's been a great exercise, and we'll see what happens in the future. So right here, he tells you what they were exploring was a strategic partnership, not necessarily selling part of the conference, but a strategic partnership, someone they could partner with to help them grow the business of the conference and use as a capital resource. And it says they're not ready to take that jump. Why? I mean, we heard reports that there were several schools in the Big 12 on a call with several schools in the ACC about private capital just recently. Now, we don't know what the outcome of those calls are going to be or were, but I've got a really good feeling that several schools in the Big 12 want to do a private capital deal. Apparently, there are some schools who don't feel comfortable jumping in that water just yet. I would love to know who those schools are. We may not ever know, but I got a really good feeling that West Virginia is on board with private capital because Gordon Gee is part of one of the commissions that have been exploring a super league that's funded by private capital. Now, it doesn't mean he's a fan of it on the conference level, but the thing is, West Virginia is getting a new school president. I'm not sure what new president Michael Benson's stance is on private capital, but we'll see. But you've got all 16 teams, or at least majority of them, will have to be on board with a move like this, and apparently they're not. We know Brett Yormark is based on his past comments. He just made a comment last week in an article that he wants the Big 12 to be the first to make the move. I think that was him sending a message to his conference, to his membership, saying, hey, we need to do this. But apparently they don't think it's a good idea. And I think they're making a mistake. I really think they're making a mistake by not doing it. I think they needed to do it. I don't see how else you compete with the big boys. I just don't see it. When I say big boys, I'm talking SEC and Big Ten. How do you compete with the Power 2 if you're not willing to take these risks? If you're not willing to jump into a deal with a private capital firm? If you're not willing to sell the naming rights of the conference? Now, look, I don't know the reasons why, but they should have figured out a way to make it happen. And as a fan of a team in the Big 12 right now, I'm concerned because I felt like the Big 12 was going to make this deal. I felt like they were going to get influx of cash into the league, help them cover the costs for the house settlement and all this stuff that they've got coming up, help them be more competitive on the field. Nope, can't do it. Can't do it because apparently there are holdouts in the league who don't want to take the jump or take the leap. And I feel passionate that it's a terrible, terrible mistake. And I feel like the conference is going to pay for this down the road unless they find some other creative ways to bring money into the league outside of these ideas. And look, I'm all ears for ideas of what you guys think, but I think it's a huge mistake. Daniel Gigax is in the house. Thank you, Daniel. He says maybe the naming rights for the conference might be tied up with the individual universities' deals, and it's possible. We do know that West Virginia, for example, has a deal with Allstate. You've seen the Allstate commercial. West Virginia does make money off that commercial, is my understanding. Maybe there's, that's just one example. Maybe there's, because we had heard rumors about the Allstate Big 12. Maybe that's an example of a deal that might be getting in the way. I don't know, but go to somebody else. There are so many companies out there. There had to be a company out there that was not tied in to one of your schools. Had to be somebody willing to do it. And I just, Old Trap or Beef Jerky, somebody that's not tied into one of your schools. And that was only going to bring, probably $2 to $3 million per school, the deal they were talking about for the naming rights. But hey, in this day and time, that's $2 to $3 million more you've got to pay your athletes. And they need that money. And the private capital deal would have been a huge influx of money. I mean, we're talking tens of millions potentially for these schools. They needed that money. It's not coming right now, at least not in the near future. H. Bar Farkle says, I am afraid that the Big 12 is missing an opportunity that will end in a less than optimal result. H. Bar Farkle, I completely 100% agree. Mr. Monkey says, hey, Couz, I think I heard that the members are interested in PE, but only defined in a certain way. Some parts of PE are attractive, some not. And I understand that, Mr. Monkey says, but again, why would you, find a way to work. Find a way to make it work. Figure it out, man. That's the issue I'm having here. Could they not figure something out that did work for everybody? H. Bar Farkle says most of the Big 12 schools are not able to keep up with the big boys without significant help. Amen. Daniel Gigak says Couz's corner Big 12 in the near future. Buddy, if I ever get to that point, it's a dream, man. It'd be a dream. It'd be like the scene from Dumb and Dumber where I guess it's Lloyd says, she tells him there's a 1 in a million shot, and he says, so you're saying there's a chance? Cheers, Beers, Mountaineers. Another VIP member on the channel says, slightly off traffic here, but I am curious what you think about a possible ACC Big 12 merger. Some rumors floating around on that. Yeah, I haven't seen those rumors. I've talked about it on the show, how I think it's not a terrible idea. I as a fan of a team who's a large portion of our fan base has wanted to be in the ACC, and West Virginia's tried to get in the ACC multiple times, and it didn't work. And we like we're probably a better cultural fit in the Big 12 than we are the ACC, to be honest. But the ACC makes a lot more sense geographically. So I love it because it would get West Virginia back in a conference. You could maintain the culture of the Big 12, still play ACC teams too. It kind of best of both worlds for me as a West Virginia fan. But I think it's an extremely long shot. Now, if there is something like that brewing, then that would be a reason not to do this Big 12 deal, right? Because you could do a larger deal as 2 leagues. And maybe there's something like that out there brewing. Maybe even if it's not a merger, maybe the Big 12 and ACC are going to work together on some kind of TV scheduling agreement or some other, which actually they actually talk about that. So I don't think that's coming either, by the way. So let's go ahead. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and talk about that. That's a good segue, actually. They asked a question later in this interview that said, hold on, there's a question here somewhere about working with other conferences. Oh, it says, with the Big 10 and SEC considering a scheduling agreement, does the Big 12 need something similar? Here's Brett Yormark's answer. He says, no, we're fine. We love our out-of-conference schedule. We don't necessarily have an alliance with any particular conference. We play them all, end quote. So he's, of course, he can't, even if they're talking about something behind the scenes, he's not going to be able to come out and say it. I get that. But that was a pretty direct answer. We don't necessarily, he did throw the word necessarily in there, have an alliance with any particular conference. We play them all. So, again, maybe that's the politically correct answer he's given, but he did address it. But I personally don't think there's going to be a merger, but I would not be surprised if there is some sort of an agreement, scheduling agreement down the road. I think they need to. I think the ACC and Big 12 have got to figure out a way to work together, whether it's bundling TV deals, something, in order to bring more value to each other and to their member schools. I think they have to, especially now that the ACC's on this unequal revenue sharing model. The schools in the middle and at the bottom of that league are going to need, especially the ones at the bottom, are going to need a boost. And heck, the Big 12 needs a boost too. Let's not kid ourselves here. The Big 12 is slightly behind the ACC in per team payout right now. And depending on who you ask, that number could grow. So we'll see. Nate Simmons says Iowa State has something similar with All-State. All-State gives money to the General Scholarship Fund where every field goal made by the football team. Yeah, I don't know I know West Virginia has a deal with them with that commercial, and I think there may be even more to it than that. But yeah. But I still think there's other companies out there that you could do deals with outside of All-State. And you've got 16 teams in your league. Those teams do have deals with companies, multiple deals with companies. But my gosh, there's hundreds of thousands or I don't know, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of companies out there to choose from, man. Pick one, find one, do a deal, do something. Just everything being on pause or doing nothing to me is an absolute horrible place to be right now when you've got the Big 10 and SEC over here kicking around all these ideas to bring themselves more money down the road and widen that gap even more. And if you're not even able to keep up the momentum where you're at, man, you're just going to keep falling further and further behind. This article really disappointed me. Again, I'm hoping there's something brewing behind the scenes outside of this that might be bigger than this. I don't know. We'll see. Some more interesting quotes from this article. They asked us, this was a very, very well done Q&A here. They asked him about March Madness expansion, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. They asked him about the, potential college football playoff expansion. Did we even talk about the naming rights deal? Let's talk about that real quick. That says, is selling naming rights to the Big 12 no longer being explored? He says, I don't know if it's on the table or off the table because we've created a lot of equity behind, quote, Big 12. We have put a lot behind it. I think our narrative and profile is very different today than it's ever been, especially on the heels of realignment. We're 16 strong now, coast to coast. I think there are ways that we can monetize our business without necessarily giving up our name. So, not that it's off the table, but I would say it's probably on pause right now because we are finding other ways to grow the commercial side of the business without necessarily having to give up the equity that we're building. So maybe Brett Yormark's got something up his sleeve here. I don't know. We'll see. I hope he does because they need the cash. The Big 12 needs cash desperate, and they need it desperately. And the teams need it desperately. But let's go to the questions about the college football playoff. If I can find it here. Says, where do you see conference championship games fitting in if the college football playoff expands to 16 teams? We're in it for the long haul with our conference championship game. It's kind of the new win and you're in. It's going to continue to have drama if we go with the 5+11 format. That is our preference. We think it's fair. We want to earn it on the field. So that segues into the next topic I want to talk about, which is the 5+11 college football playoff model that's being kicked around. And the Big 12 and others seem to be in favor of it. Before we talk about that, though, I do need to give I have not given a shout out to my sponsor yet, so let's do that real quick. I'll be right back. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. Thank you for being patient, letting me get through the housekeeping. It's much appreciated. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the CFP. Heather Dennis did a great article over at ESPN. She says a 16-team college football playoff model featuring the top 5 conference champions and 11 at-large teams is gaining traction following SEC spring meetings this week. But the next step in playoff expansion for 26 and beyond will depend on how quickly the sports leaders can make a flurry of decisions. Says a critical component is the SEC's choice between staying at 8 league games or moving to 9, a topic ACC sources say could be revisited in their league after years of being dormant if prompted by playoff expansion. The linchpin to those scheduling decisions is one thing every conference seems to agree on: the need for clarity about how the CFP selection committee ranks its teams, starting with how strength of schedule is determined and applied. Now, that's one big thing the SEC, today, after their week of meetings, the SEC went around handing out basically a booklet explaining why the SEC is so superior to everybody else in strength of schedule. And Greg Sankey did, I think it was on the Paul Feinbaum show, maybe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. He went on and said, hey, we've got to make sure changes are done to the committee. If we go to this 5-11 model, basically, we've got to make sure that the criteria makes sense on how they choose the teams. So basically the SEC whining because they have one team get left out 1 year and they're crying about the selection committee's picks. Alabama lost to Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, 2 average football teams in their conference. Don't lose to average football teams, and you make it. If you only If you win one of those games, Alabama, you're in. Don't lose the games, man. And the year before that, Alabama got selected over top of Florida State, but you don't hear Greg Sankey talk about that, do you? You don't hear Greg Sankey talk about how Alabama should not have gotten in the previous year, and it should have been Florida State who won a power conference undefeated. So they want to whine and cry when it doesn't go their way one time. One friggin' time. Any other year, it usually goes their way. But anyway, I digress. That's a whole nother tangent I could go on. But he wants changes done. So it looks like this 5+11 model is gaining steam even in SEC circles. Now, remember, it was actually the Big Ten who originally proposed the 4 automatic qualifiers for the two, for the SEC and Big Ten. It was not the SEC who proposed that. They were open to it. They discussed it, but it was the Big Ten's idea. So it looks like, Greg, it's possible that the Big Ten and SEC may not agree here. We've heard SEC coaches come out in favor of a 5+11. Coaches want to earn it on the field, man. And even the Big 12's come out in favor of this. The Big 12, who might actually stand to lose from a 5+11 format because they may only get in their one automatic qualifier every year, or at least most years. We could see 5, even 6 Big Ten and SEC teams getting into the playoffs in a lot of years. That's not good for the Big 12 and the ACC, but they see the value in earning your spot, not just giving it away because you're in a certain conference. That is not what sports is built on. Sports is built on competition, and that's one of the reasons I think the 5+11 model is the right model. It might not be the best for the Big 12, at least not today, but I think it's better for the sport. Your conference champion automatically gets in. It still means winning the conference matters. It still means the regular season matters. You win your league, you're in, more than likely. Top 5 ranked conference champs will get an automatic bid. That more in most years will be the Big 12. The Big 12 champion will be one of those teams. I like that. It also gives the Big 12 opportunities to earn another spot or two, depending on how their teams do. Now, the parity in the Big 12 where these teams like to beat up on each other, it's going to make it difficult. There's going to be a lot of 2 and 3 loss teams in the Big 12 most years. But hey, who knows? Maybe we see 1 or 2 teams become more dominant over the next few years, right? And we see a team, we see a Clemson-like run by a team. Not saying they win multiple national championships, but you get my point. Maybe we see a team or 2 or 3 in the Big 12 kind of separate themselves above everyone else over the next few years. Maybe that happens. And if that's the case, then maybe the Big 12 can get multiple teams in the playoff. But how do you know? I mean, we've only had a 12-team format 1 year. They're already going to be moving to 16 teams in 26, more than likely, or at least 14 teams. I mean, my gosh. Let's let this thing play out for a few more years before we just start changing everything and giving these conferences automatic qualifiers. It makes no sense to do that, in my opinion. It just flies in the face of what sports is supposed to be about. It's not they shouldn't be giving participation trophies to 5th and 6th place teams in leagues. If you're a 5th or 6th place team, you shouldn't be able to play a play-in game to get in the CFP. I think that's hogwash and ignorant. But hopefully the 5+11 model is the one they'll go with. Here's a quote from Greg Sankey. He says, "I do think there's a need for change," end quote. How do you make those decisions? It's hard, and we trust the committee to do that, and I respect the people in there. So this isn't a criticism of the people. This is wanting to understand the decisions. We have to have better clarity on the criteria that inform those decisions, end quote. It says, currently strength of schedule is one of several factors not weighed in the committee's ambiguous protocol. Language the FBS commissioners wrote at the inception of the 14 playoff in 2014. There's a sense among some athletic directors in the SEC and ACC that moving to 9 conference games is feasible if the committee doesn't penalize teams for losing 2 or 3 games against strong opponents. But basically, the push from the SEC now at the end of their meetings is, hey, let's clarify the criteria. They're wanting to put a major focus on strength of schedule. Well, of course they are, because that's going to benefit them in most years, right? Because they feel like their conference has the toughest strength of schedule. And in most years, that's true. I'm not going to argue that. But that might not be the case 5, 6, 7 years from now. We don't know that. I don't like predicting the future based on the past. I don't think you should do that in sports. You should earn it. And if the SEC continues to dominate the way they have in previous years, then so be it. They dominate. But let's not forget, they haven't had a team in a national championship game for the last 2 years, right? It was Michigan, TCU, and then, or I'm sorry, that was 3 years ago. We saw Michigan beat Washington, and then we saw Ohio State beat Notre Dame, right? So we haven't seen an SEC team in the national championship game since Georgia beat TCU 3 seasons ago. So, yeah, SEC, maybe they're not as dominant as they think they are. But, we've seen, it looks like most of the leagues, now we haven't heard the Big Ten because they don't talk to the media, which is baffling to me. But we pretty much all the conferences outside of the Big Ten want the 5+11 model. So looks like there is definitely leaning in that direction. And again, that the main reason I think it's a good idea, because you went earning on the field. I think it's best for the sport. Now, there are a couple other reasons I think it's a good idea. And I'm gonna pull up. I posted on Twitter about this the other day, and I can't remember exactly how I worded it. But I was going to pull up the reasons I think. Well, I don't see it now, but anyway, there are a lot of reasons why I think but the main one is just it's best for the sport. I think it's the way to go. And also, you don't want to sign away. Oh, one of the reasons was you don't want to sign away. If you're the Big 12, you don't want to basically make it official in writing and codify that your conference is only half as good as two of the other power conferences. Do you really want to do that? You're setting yourself up for precedent that can be used against you in recruiting. Shout out to Paul Catalina over at 365 Sports for bringing that up on his show today. They can use it against you in recruiting. It's automatically going to give them a larger share of the college football playoff money, which they're already getting anyway. So, I mean, the automatic qualifiers would, because it's based on how many teams you get in. So they would automatically be setting themselves up to automatically get that much more money every year on top of the additional money they're already getting. So that's another reason that I think you don't want to go to automatic qualifiers. The recruiting piece, and you don't want to just say, hey, we admit we're only half as good as these other leagues. You don't want to do that, especially when you're in the Power Four. Heck, even the G5s don't want to do that. This is athletic competition here. You can't just automatically give up and say, hey, yeah, we're not as good as you. You take 4 spots. That makes 0 sense to me. Now, if it's forced on you and you're forced to do the 4-4-2-2-1 model and you get 2 AQs, you take it. And you're probably not super bummed about it, but you take it. Because you're going to get at least those 2 spots every year. So anyway, that's the reasons I like the 5-11 model. Primary reasons. It's just it's the best thing for the sport. And I still think it gives the Big 12 an opportunity to earn spots in the playoff. There are going to be some years they'll get 2 teams in. There might be years they'll get 3 teams in. Who knows? But I think they'll get 1 every year, and a lot of years they'll get 2. Last year they would have only gotten 1 because BYU and Iowa State were just on the outside looking in. I think they were ranked around 17, 18 or 18, 19, somewhere in there. But that's not going to be the case every year. There will be a lot of years you'll have 2 teams, 2 Big 12 teams inside the top 16, or even 3 teams inside the top 16. So I'm all for the 5+11 model, at least right now. Like I said, run through the 2031 cycle, see how it goes, and then if you need to change it in 2031, change it in 2031. But don't be changing it only 1 year in. My gosh, give it time to breathe. Oh, another reason I didn't. Here's the other reason that I think the 5-11 model works even for the Big 12 is because the money factor. If you do the automatic qualifiers, if you give the SEC and Big 10 those 4 automatic qualifiers, that sets them up to start scheduling non-conference games against each other. Now, they could do that anyway, but there's less incentive to do it if you don't give them the AQs, right? They won't play, and then if they do that, that's even more TV money they're going to make in it, more than you're making, right? They're already beating you by 40, 50 million a year. They're going to make even more if they play each other in the non-con. And if that happens, they might stop playing teams in the Big 12 and ACC, outside of maybe a few rivalry games. You don't want that to happen if you can help it. So that's another reason. And it sets up the play-in games for, or like I mentioned earlier, where you have, the third place team in the SEC playing the sixth place team to see who gets that third and fourth spot. You got the fourth place team and fifth place team. And again, that's more meaningful games for the SEC and more TV money they could get. Whereas the Big 12 wouldn't have as many of those opportunities, or the ACC either for that matter. So it just gives them the opportunity to widen that financial gap even more. So financially, you don't want the SEC and Big Ten to gain to widen the gap anymore. B, they can use it on you in recruiting because you're automatically admitting that you're only half as good as them. And reason 3, it's just best for the sport to earn your way into the playoff. And yes, I know the SEC and Big Ten have some built-in advantages that will help them do that. But man, I don't know what else you do at this point. You've got to punch above your weight class if you're the Big 12. You've got to earn it. You've got to just prove people wrong. You've got to have that chip on your shoulder, and you've got to go out and you got to win football games, and you earn your way in. It's the American way, man, and it's the Big 12 way, in my opinion. Teams in the Big 12 ought to be accustomed to having to do that. It's kind of what the league's built on. That chip on the shoulder, us against the world mentality, to me, is the Big 12. So go out and use that to your advantage. All right. Just a reminder, guys, to please hit that thumbs up button if you're watching this live, or even if you're watching this on the playback. The thumbs up really helps the algorithm, helps get this content pushed out to more people. Subscribe to the channel, please. I'm getting closer and closer to 10,000 subscribers. I'd love to get there by the end of the calendar year. I can do that with your help. So if you haven't subscribed, if you're watching this on X, once the show's over, please come over to my YouTube channel, Couz's Corner. Please subscribe over there. You can also obviously see my past content. Make sure you hit the notification bell to turn on your notifications to make sure you get notified of future live streams and videos. And I don't like to brag on myself a whole lot, but I was proud of the fact the other day that I hit 2.7 million views overall on my channel. I thought that was a very big milestone. YouTube sent me that notification the other day. I was proud of that. I put in about 3.5 years of work on this channel now. So to get that 2.7 million was a big deal. So thanks to all of you for getting me to that point. But yeah. And if you want to guide the conversation in the direction you want it to go, as always, you can always drop me a super chat, hit the $ near the chat box, drop your comment. It's an easy way to donate to what I'm doing here. Help me keep the lights on. And obviously it'll highlight your comment, and I'll be sure to read it on the air or answer your question if you ask a question. H. Bar Farkle, you make a great point. You see the badge beside his name, it means he's a VIP member, and VIP members get first dibs on comments, obviously, in the chat. I also offer paid memberships. You can hit the join button on my channel homepage. But he says Big 12 teams have to beat the Alabamas and Georgias to be highly thought of. Absolutely. They've got to, anytime they play games. What's up, John? John Lewis from Bama, the Bama Fan Podcast. What's up, brother? Big 12 teams, when you play non-con games against the ACC, Big 10, SEC, you've got to win them, man. You've got to win some of those games to prove that you belong, to prove that you're not second fiddle to those leagues. All right, next topic we're going to talk about is another sort of a controversial topic, and that is, and again, David Rumsey over at Front Office Sports talked about the potential expansion of the NCAA basketball tournament. But before we get to that, we do have a super chat to get to. Thank you to Fuzzy Balls for the $5 super chat. He says it just sucks that West Virginia and Cincinnati aren't in the same conference as Virginia Tech, Louisville, Pitt, and Syracuse. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, if they're, I've heard rumors floating around about a Big 12 ACC merger. I haven't heard those rumors. I've talked about it, how I'd love to see it happen, but I haven't heard it. Best of both worlds to me, because West Virginia fits culturally in the Big 12, in my opinion, better than the ACC. They would get to remain there with those teams that they fit well with culturally, but yet geographically they fit better with the ACC, and they could get back to playing their old rivals like Pitt every year, and Virginia Tech and Louisville. Syracuse, the Cincinnati-Louisville rivalry could be revamped, right? A lot of really good rivalry. Syracuse and West Virginia, a lot of people don't realize this. Syracuse and West Virginia had a long-standing rivalry from their Big East days. Actually had a trophy game they played for every year called the Schwartzwalder Trophy. I think I pronounced that right. So the winner of that game got a trophy every year to put in their trophy case. It meant something. That was a rivalry game. And it would be cool to have some of those games back, for nostalgia reasons, some of it. And then again, just, you've got teams that closer geographically. It'd be less travel for the teams, less travel for the fan bases. And me, I'm biased. I like traveling. I live here in Southern West Virginia. I would love to be able to travel to the Carolinas to games. I can be to the Carolinas. I can be to North Carolina quicker than I can be to Morgantown. So it would be cool for me to be able to travel to North Carolina, Duke, NC State, those types of play, Wake Forest, even closer. So, yeah, it'd be cool. Virginia Tech's only an hour down the road from me. I'd love to be able to go to Blacksburg and watch a game every other year. So, yeah, obviously would be great for us West Virginia fans to have those games as conference games again. But at the same time, I've developed such a passion and love for the Big 12. It would be sad to see, I wouldn't want to see us leave that either. So hopefully somehow or another they can all come together, maybe at some point in the future, whether it be through a Super League or whether it be through just the two teams doing a scheduling agreement or the two leagues doing a scheduling agreement, or even if it does come down to a full-blown merger at some point in the future, maybe that's the way it happens too. We'll see. Another controversial topic, NCAA tournament expansion, being talked about a lot. Brett Yormark was asked about it. That is, he's talked about it in the past. He's all for it. Most of the power leagues are all for it. Bill Self made a comment earlier in the week that he's all for it. So we're going to talk about that. Though, before I do that, I want to give another shout out to the other sponsor you see here in the corner, Appalachia Digital. I have a new website, still fairly new, called WVSportsChat.com, which, by the way, we are looking to start trying to build and do a lot more work on. But they designed that website. Again, it's WVSportsChat.com. Go check it out. They did a fantastic job designing it. If you want to design yourself a brand new website, or you want to get your current site found easier on Google, the fine folks over at Appalachia Digital can help with that. Go to appalachiadigital.com/Couz. Let them know I sent you, and check them out today, and they will be glad to help you with your needs. Now, David Rumsey, again, another great article on NCAA tournament expansion, looking to expand to 62 or to 72 or 76 is what he's saying here. But there's something in this article that is baffling to me. Most fans, I haven't seen one fan yet that is for expanding the NCAA tournament. So it's a little frustrating to me that these power leagues are not listening to their fan bases, which I don't know why we're surprised by it. They never have. But nonetheless, they're not listening to us fans. We don't want the NCAA tournament to expand. Leave it the way it is. It really didn't even need to expand to 68. But, we can live with that. It's only, 4 more games? So, we can live with it. But, man, come on. To go to 7, why do you need to go to 72? Yes, it would have benefited West Virginia this past year. And every year there are teams it would benefit. But at the end of the day, how often are we going to see those teams winning a national championship? Maybe once in a while. Maybe they make a Final Four run like we saw UCLA do a few years ago, going from the play-in game to the Final Four. It's possible. But, man, why do we need to keep growing this thing? It's one of the few things in sports that really hasn't been messed with a ton anyway over the years. It's been tweaked a little, but hasn't been, revamped or redone or expanded, or they always think bigger is not always better, man. In college sports, especially these big 16, 18 team conferences, it's not better. A 72 or 76 team NCAA tournament is not better. And I'm going to say, I'm starting to wonder if an expanded college football playoff was even better. I was all for it at first, but I'm starting to think our guy Josh Pate may have been onto something. They're trying to make a mess of it now. So I guess time will tell. We're only 1 year into that, but my point is, bigger's not always better. Don't mess with the NCAA tournament. I think they feel like there's going to be financial benefits to doing it, because it says in this article they don't plan on adding any more automatic berths through conference championships because there are no more conference champions to crown. Right? They're crowning them all already. So it would all be at-large bids. So what's that mean? That means you're going to see more power conference teams in the NCAA tournament most years. That additional 6 to 8 teams that get in, I'd say 75, 80, 90% of those will be Power 4 teams most of the time. And here's the kicker, though. In this article by Mr. Rumsey, which, again, I'll link to in the description after the show, it says, NCAA President Charlie Baker said discussions are underway with March Madness media rights holders, CBS and Warner Brothers Discovery, about expanding the men's tournament from 68 to 72 or 76 teams beginning in 2026. So they want to do it as early as this coming college basketball season. He says, we've had good conversations with CBS and WBD, Baker said Thursday at the Big 12 spring meetings. Our goal here is to try to either get to yes or no sometime in the next few months, because there's a lot of logistical work that would be associated with doing this if we were to go down this road, end quote. He says Baker confirmed expansion would come immediately. That would be the goal, to try and do this for next year, which is why the window to actually negotiate it will probably end sometime early summer, he said. We've been talking about 72 and 76. Those have been the numbers the basketball committee has talked about. It would obviously be one or the other, won't be more. Thank goodness. Talks about Bill Self's comments, talks about Brett Yormark's comments, which, basically echoing what Charlie Baker's saying. Here's the part of the article that I thought that this really irks me. Okay. Not only they're not listening to the fans, according to this article, there may not even be much financial incentive to do this. Listen to this quote. It says, Thursday afternoon, media executives told Front Office Sports that the additional games were not worth much. One executive, who declined to be named, was very straightforward, and he said, and I quote, I believe CBS and TNT will offer them zero or a minus amount. They're expanding the earliest round for no apparent reason, other than the powers that be think it's worth more, end quote. This executive, now obviously he said this anonymously, he doesn't think TNT and CBS will give them more money. So if they're not going to give them more money, then don't do it. And hopefully they won't. There's a part of me that hopes Warner Brothers and CBS says, we're not giving you more money. We don't want to mess this up. This is a good thing. Let's keep it where we're at. And oh, by the way, we don't need to be spending this extra money on a couple more games of teams that likely aren't really going to move the needle all that much. Let's be honest. So they would rather put their money probably into football, more football games or something, or more pro sports, something like that. The NCAA tournament's extremely popular, don't get me wrong, but it's still not as popular as pro football, and college football. So that quote there really struck me as ironic. So maybe there's a possibility here that this gets nixed by the TV networks. Maybe the TV networks don't want to do this. It's very possible. It says, while Baker said the NCAA has no intention of changing the 31 automatic qualifiers, which I mentioned earlier, for March Madness, he admitted those entries keep out teams that are tournament worthy in his mind. And he talks about how if you got, there are always tournament worthy teams left out. It's going to be, if you go to 76, teams 77 and 78 are going to argue they were tournament worthy. It's not going to change. There's always going to, anytime you have these objective, or I guess these subjective committees picking tournament participants, which has always been the case in college sports, there's going to be teams feel like they got screwed. It happens every single year. I don't care if you have 4 teams. I don't care if you have 12 teams. I don't care if you have 64, 68, 76. It doesn't matter. Stop screwing up a good thing, chasing a buck. It's getting old, man. At some point, fans are going to start turning the TV off. You're going to water everything down, chasing a buck, and you're ruining the product. Quit messing with the product. And again, this is coming from a fan of a team who would have gotten in under this scenario a season ago. Doesn't matter. That was one season. You don't want to base a decision on one season like SEC's trying to get him to do over the college football playoff. Yeah, they have a team that should have gotten in, left out one season, and they're throwing a hissy fit. It's not needed. There's always going to be a team left out, regardless of how many teams you have in it. Unless you put every single team in the NCAA in the tournament, somebody's getting left out. Enough's enough. H. Ball Farkle says, I believe the NCAA tournament is as close to perfect as anything done by the NCAA. Leave it alone. Great comment, H. Bar Farkle. And I agree. I was actually going to use the word perfect. I refrained from it just because I don't like using that word. But it's true. It's the closest thing to perfect they have. It's the one thing the NCAA does right. We can on here. We can complain about the NCAA, how they impose infractions and how they create rules or don't make rules, whatever. We can, and all that's justified. But the one thing they do extremely well is put on the NCAA, and really all their postseason tournaments usually turn out from. I mean, I don't follow a ton of other college sports, but the NCAA knows how to host a postseason tournament, and they do it well. It's the one thing they do well. Don't screw it up. Don't now, and of course, it would still be the NCAA. I get that it would still be the NCAA controlling it, but we don't need to expand it, man. We don't need to expand it. Just leave it alone. The fans don't want it expanded. The media doesn't want it expanded. The only people who want it expanded are basically the Power Four teams because they want to make more money for their conferences. That's the only. Maybe I don't. I'd love to hear from a mid-major school or mid-major AD or mid-major conference commissioner what they think about the expansion. Do they want it too? Who knows? And if Greg Sankey gets his way, the Power Four will pull away from the NCAA anyway, and it won't matter. They'll do their own tournament, which would really screw things up. But anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. There's one more topic I want to discuss on tonight's show. I've been on 45 minutes. Thank you all for joining. I know it's kind of late on the East Coast, at least later than I normally do shows anyway. There is one more topic, and this one is West Virginia related. So I apologize if you're not a West Virginia fan. Maybe you don't want to hear this. Maybe you do. I don't know. But what we're going to talk about, kickoff times have been announced for 4 of West Virginia's football games this upcoming season. And I'm going to do a quick screen share here. I think I've got these ready to pull up. Do I? No, I don't. But there is an article on this over at my website, wvsportschat.com. I'll just pull that up. Actually, you know what? I'll pull up the graphic. I think that's better. WVU Football put out a graphic. On it today. All right, here we go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share, and we'll look at this together. And I'll just give you my quick thoughts. This won't take but a minute. But it says, all right, the opening game of the season against Robert Morris, their lone FCS opponent, will take place in Milan Puskar Stadium August 30th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and will air on ESPN+. Now, West Virginia, the home team in these ESPN Plus games, the home team picks the game time. The last couple of years, they had decided to go to 6 p.m. games. But they're moving it back to 2 this year. So I'll be interested to see why. But 2 p.m. Eastern Time, I don't love those mid-afternoon games, but I don't hate it either. It's better than noon. Gives you a couple more extra hours to tailgate. And it's and it gives fans time to drive. Fans that have to drive a good distance, it gives them time to get back home in a decent hour, right? So it's not terrible. That's the opening game. And then on week 2, they travel to Ohio, September 6th, to play the Ohio Bobcats in Ohio. One of the rare occasions you'll see West Virginia go on the road, and probably the last time as long as Ren Baker's AD, you'll see the West Virginia go on the road to play a G5 team or G6 team. But that game will take place at 4 p.m. Eastern Time and will air on ESPNU. So a 4 p.m. kick against the Ohio Bobcats in week 2. Week 3, the backyard brawl, baby. We were hoping this would be a night game. We were hoping the Mountaineers would be able to pull out the Coal Rush uniforms. I expect this will probably be the game they pull out the new throwback 1965 uniforms. But they play the Pitt Panthers in Morgantown at 3:30 p.m. It'll air on ESPN. Let's hope, fingers crossed, that College Game Day comes to Morgantown for that game. With Pat McAfee, I feel like his show will probably be in town at least, but let's hope College Game Day comes. It'll air on ESPN. Return of Rich Rod to Morgantown will play Pitt for the first time since the 13-9 debacle game in 2007, and it's played on 9/13. You can't make this stuff up. Cannot make it up. And it airs on ESPN, kicks at 3:30 p.m. Again, too bad it ain't a 7 p.m. kick, but we'll take it. And then October 3rd, the lone Friday night game on the schedule this year for the Mountaineers, they travel to Provo to take on BYU on October 3rd, the dreaded 10:30 p.m. Eastern kick. Yes, Mountaineer fans, we have to stay up past midnight to see our guys play. But you know what? I'm staying up after midnight. I'm in, baby. I'll do it. I would love to be able to get out to Provo for this game. Very, very slim chance that happens. But at least I'll be staying up to watch it, even though it will kick at 10:30. So these kickoff times are, I don't love them. I'd prefer the Pitt game be a night game, and I'd prefer the BYU game be earlier. But the other two, I really don't care. The other two, I really aren't that passionate about. But anyway, we at least know now, for those of us who have tickets, we can at least plan around. We know what nights to get our hotels. You can make your travel plans, do what you need to do to get ready for these games now that you know what time they're going to take place. So that was announced today. I wanted to share that with you. There is one more thing that I did want to talk about. And, you see this 3:30 p.m. kick for the Pitt game. My good guy, Jonathan Martin, who's a co-host on the show on our Golden Blue Breakdown show that we normally do once a week. We're not doing it every week now because there's just not a ton of content, West Virginia content to talk about. But he posted reposted a tweet about the Big 12 partnering with WWE once again. See if I can find that tweet again about the Big 12 and the WWE. And I actually thought this was a really good idea. Some people said it wasn't that great of an idea, but I like it. But again, I'm a WWE guy, so maybe I'm biased. But the Big 12 is going to partner with the WWE, and what's going to happen? Friday Night SmackDown is going to hold their event in a Big 12 city on Friday night before a Big 12 football game at some point. I don't remember the number. I could not find the tweet. I thought the Big 12 put it out there, but they did not. But yeah, they're going to be in there. Here it is. Big 12 conference. Oh, that was 2023's. Dang it. I'm not sure why the Big 12 didn't put out an announcement on this today. Somebody did, because I saw it. What am I missing? I don't know the number, but anyway, the Big 12 was going to partner. WWE is going to hold SmackDown in a Big 12 city on a Friday night before a Big 12 football game on Saturday, a handful of times throughout the course of the season. And maybe it ain't a big deal. Maybe it is. Anything the Big 12 can do, in my opinion, to bring more eyeballs to the league is a good thing. And the reason I think the WWE's multiple reasons I think the WWE is a good partner for the Big 12. I think the Big 12 fan base, when you look at a professional wrestling audience, and then you look at who watches it versus who watches Big 12 football, I'd say there's a lot of crossover there, right? B, you can bring in new audience members. There are WWE fans who probably don't watch Big 12 football. You can bring those people in by doing the joint cross-promotion stuff. And it's outside the box. It's something different. And when you look at who WWE is owned by, they're owned by Endeavor. TKO is the arm of Endeavor that owns WWE along with UFC. Endeavor is they're very valuable in the sports business space. They helped the Big 12 get the TV deal done with ESPN and Fox. Very well known. They helped them in consulting with adding the Four Corner schools. They've helped them in multiple occasions. Well, guess who the WWE recently partnered with and TKO recently partnered with for a TV deal? Netflix. They made a massive TV deal with Netflix. So is it possible that Brett Yormark is trying to leverage his relationship with Endeavor and TKO to try to segue that into a deal with Netflix coming in 2031? Something to think about. And I think it's a brilliant move. It may not bring a ton of money to the league, maybe only a fraction more exposure, but I'm telling you, it's all about relationships, man. And Brett Yormark, in my opinion, I think he's doing these things to build relationships. If you get in with TKO, you get in with Endeavor, it helps you get in with Netflix. And even if you don't get a deal with Netflix, even if you do a negotiation with Netflix, you can use that as leverage to get a deal with Amazon or ESPN or Fox or somebody else. So I think it's brilliant. It's tying everything together. You got to look beyond just, oh, it's pro wrestling, it's fake, whatever. Look beyond that, man. Look beyond the new eyeballs to the league. Look beyond the cross promotion. Look beyond all that and look ahead down the line at the relationships, the potential partnerships that can be that can add value to the Big 12 conference. That, to me, is why that move is so important. You've got to look big picture here. All right, let's touch on a few more comments by some VIP members here. Daniel Gigak says he's going to the BYU game with Nate, and that's Nate Bomber Brown over at College Football Mafia. As a matter of fact, Daniel is part of the College Football Mafia team. Go check them out. They do shows just about every night of the week. Go check them out. Cheers Beers and Mountaineers says, let's not forget our dear brother Pat McAfee is part of WWE. Bingo. And guess what? Ren Baker is a huge wrestling fan, y'all. For those of you who don't know, Ren Baker loves professional wrestling. He's a huge fan. He got professional wrestling events when he was at North Texas. They had professional wrestling events there, like at or near the stadium, to help raise money for the athletic department. Is it possible he could get WWE SmackDown to Morgantown the night before the Backyard Brawl with Pat McAfee on the mic? That would be awesome. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Michelle Weintraub, for hopping in. Guys, I have got to jump off of here. Thank you, Bob Swanger, Sun Devil ASU. Thank you all for hopping in. Sorry I can't answer more comments. I have got to roll. My wife has to get up early for work in the morning, so I'm going to have to roll. Thank you. If you're watching this, guys, whether live or on the replay, please hit that thumbs up button. It really helps get this content pushed out to more people. Thank you so much for tuning into this live edition of Couz's Corner. I know it was a very jam-packed show, and I packed it all into 57 minutes. Hopefully, I did it justice. But I really appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate the support. Don't forget about my sponsors, Cass Counter, Stone Street, and Buckner, and Appalachia Digital. Thank them for helping me keep the lights on. Thanks to all my paid VIP members. Thanks to all of you for watching. Thanks to all of you for supporting me. I'm not going anywhere. At least I don't plan to. So thank you. Thank you for everything. Have a great night, a great day, a top shelf day in Q Country Roads.